At 29, Callie Rivera never imagined she'd end up applying for a nanny job. She was a marketing executive just a few months ago, sharp, stylish, respected in her field. But now, sitting nervously in the back seat of a cab on a dusty country road, she questioned everything: life, love, and most of all, her choices. Triplets, she had blurted out earlier that week when the agency called. You mean 3 actual living, screaming kids? The agency had responded with a chipper. Yes, ma'am, adorable 6-year-old girls. Their father's an architect, very respectful, very handsome too, if I may say so. Not that Callie cared. Men were exhausting, kids were worse, and triplets? That sounded like divine punishment. But she'd accepted anyway, not because she needed the money, though she kind of did, but because deep down she feared ending up alone. Maybe, just maybe, learning how to tolerate kids could prepare her for a future relationship, a future where she wouldn't panic and run the next time someone mentioned babies. So now, here she was, standing in front of a grand countryside estate that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine. If she hadn't been dreading what was inside, she might have appreciated the view. The large oak doors creaked open, and a round, grandmotherly woman appeared, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "You must be Miss Rivera," she smiled warmly. "I'm Mrs. Bell. Welcome." Callie gave her best fake nice smile. "Hi, yes, that's me. Callie. So, the children?" "Oh, they're around somewhere," Mrs. Bell chuckled. "They have the energy of an entire zoo. Their father, Mr. Daniel Cruz, is currently out of town for work. He trusts me to screen the applicants." "Right, of course." Callie smoothed her dress and tried to hide her panic. "I'm great with kids. I've taken care of my nieces before." "Do you have a long fuse, dear? Patience? No heart problems?" the woman asked, a little too casually. "Heart problems?" Callie frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" Mrs. Bell smiled cryptically. "You'll find out soon enough." Callie let out a nervous laugh and mentally screamed. What the hell did that mean? Truth be told, Callie had a very short fuse when it came to children. She found them sticky, loud, and illogical. But she also didn't want to grow old alone. So here she was, faking her way into domestic sainthood. "I have patience, and my heart's perfectly fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Good," Mrs. Bell nodded approvingly. "You can start today. Come on, I'll introduce you to the girls." As they ascended the stairs, the sound of thundering footsteps approached from the upper landing. "There they are now," Mrs. Bell announced. "Girls, this is Callie. She's your new nanny. Be nice." 3 little faces peeked from the top of the stairs, identical in features, but entirely different in attitude. The first, with a ponytail and arms crossed, sneered. "Another nanny? That's like the 5th one?" The second, in glittery slippers, eyed Callie suspiciously. "I bet you're just here to flirt with our dad." The third, the smallest and seemingly innocent one, offered a sly smile. "Welcome, Miss Callie. I brought you a gift." Callie gulped, and just like that, she realized this wasn't going to be a job. It was going to be war. Callie barely had time to react before the littlest one, the so-called sweet one, stepped forward with a suspiciously cute smile and handed her a small pink box wrapped in shiny paper. "A gift?" Callie asked, genuinely touched. "For me? That's so sweet, honey." She bent down and opened the box without thinking. Pfft! A white puff of powder exploded into her face, coating her hair, nose, and lips in something that smelled like cinnamon and rotten eggs. She coughed violently as the girls burst into laughter. "Good one, Lexi!" shouted Sophie. "You should have seen your face," cackled Zara. Lexi doubled over, squealing. "That's for the last nanny who tried to win us over with cookies." Callie blinked through the powder and forced a laugh. Wow, what a welcome. Mrs. Bell just shook her head in defeat. "And that, dear, is why I asked about your heart." Callie wiped her face and offered a strained smile. She would not be defeated on her first day, not by 3 miniature tornadoes in pigtails. Once the chaos calmed, Mrs. Bell showed her to her room. As soon as the door shut, Callie dropped her act and muttered through gritted teeth, "What am I doing with my life? 3 little monsters and 1 stupid mansion in the middle of nowhere." She paced the room and let out a scream into her pillow. And who cares if their dad is handsome? He's probably bald and has a beer belly. But before she could fully spiral, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Lexi. Yes, the evil one, with a wide grin and hands clasped behind her back. "Let me guess," Callie said flatly. "You're here to give me another gift?" "Nope, just came to say hi again," Lexi said sweetly. "Oh, and to introduce you to my pet." "Your pet?" Callie took a cautious step back. "What kind of pet?" "He's behind me," Lexi grinned. "Want to hold him?" Callie narrowed her eyes. "Why are your hands behind your back like you're hiding a bomb?" "Because I am," Lexi whispered. Before Callie could scream, Lexi flung something at her, a small fuzzy object that hit her chest and bounced onto the floor. "Ah!" Callie screeched and jumped onto the bed as Lexi rolled on the floor, laughing uncontrollably. "It's a toy rat!" Lexi wheezed. "You should have seen your face again." Callie's eye twitched. Twice in 1 hour. Mrs. Bell peeked into the room again. "Still alive?" "Barely," Callie muttered, heart racing. "I think I just lost 3 years of my life." That evening, after somehow surviving dinner, bath time, which involved Sophie using shampoo as paint, and bedtime, where Zara ran down the hall pretending to be a ghost, Callie collapsed on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her entire body ached, her hair smelled like oatmeal, and she had been splashed with bath water no less than 5 times. "I lasted 1 day," she whispered. 1 freaking day. The next morning, her first thought was, "I quit." Her second thought was, "Wait, I didn't even set an alarm." Her third thought came when a series of loud knocks rattled her bedroom door. She shot up, hair a mess, and opened it, only to come face to face with a man she thought she'd never see again. Daniel Cruz. Callie stood frozen in the doorway, still dressed in her pajamas, her hair a tangled disaster, and she realized too late, her face still smudged with leftover bath crayons from last night's chaos. Daniel Cruz didn't speak. He just stared. 6 years. That's how long it had been since they last saw each other. And of all the possible scenarios she'd ever imagined for a reunion, this was not one of them. "You," she breathed. He echoed. "You're the dad? You're the nanny?" Silence. Then, at the exact same time, both of them said, "Wow." Callie quickly tried to smooth her hair back and wipe at her face. "Okay, wait, I know this looks bad. I just didn't expect a surprise visitor before 8 a.m. Daniel blinked. "Are those marker drawings on your face?" Callie let out a short, dry laugh. "Courtesy of your kids. They're artists." Daniel crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. He looked just the same, if not better. Tall, clean-cut, with that calm intensity in his eyes that once made her weak in the knees. His jawline was a little sharper, his style more refined, but the warmth was still there. "Wow," he repeated, shaking his head. "Of all people. You're the one taking care of my kids." "I know, I can't believe it either." She folded her arms over her chest, suddenly self-conscious in her wrinkled shirt. "Funny, right? Life's cruel little joke?" Daniel chuckled. "I wouldn't say cruel, just ironic." Callie smiled weakly but avoided his eyes. 6 years ago, she was the one who ended things, on their anniversary no less. The breakup wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was cold, logical, calculated. She had made it clear She didn't want kids, and he did. End of story. Back then, she thought she was doing the right thing. She didn't want to be that woman, the one who faked her way into motherhood only to resent her children later. Now, here she was, getting drawn on with crayons by 6-year-olds. Daniel's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. "You look tired?" Callie rolled her eyes. "That's a polite way of saying I look like crap." "No, I mean, okay, maybe a little," he teased. "But mostly you look surprised." "Well, yeah, I didn't know you were their dad until 10 seconds ago, and now that I do, I'd like to formally say your daughters are tiny tyrants." "They're not that bad." "Oh, please," she huffed. "One of them tried to kill me with a fake rat. Another one dumped bubble bath on the hallway floor. And Lexi? That girl's a Bond villain in a tutu." Daniel tried to suppress a laugh and failed. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Despite herself, Callie smiled. The tension between them was still there, but so was something else. Familiarity, comfort, a tug of the past that neither of them was ready to name. "So," she began, voice softer, "how long have you been a single dad?" 5 years, he said quietly. "My wife passed away in an accident. It's been a lot." "I'm sorry," she said genuinely. And she meant it, not just because it was polite, but because the sadness in his eyes hit her like a punch to the gut. "Thanks," he replied. There was a pause. Then Daniel said something that caught her completely off guard. "I never expected to see you again, let alone in my house, taking care of my daughters." Callie looked down at her feet, guilt creeping in. "Yeah, well, neither did I." Later that night, long after the girls had fallen asleep and the house was finally quiet, Callie found herself sitting alone in the guest kitchen, sipping cold chamomile tea that had long lost its comfort. Her reflection on the glass window stared back, tired, confused, but undeniably awake. She couldn't shake the image of Daniel's face from earlier that morning, the way he looked at her, like he was still searching for the version of her he used to love, the version that had told him 6 years ago, "I don't want kids, Daniel, ever, so if you do, this isn't going to work." He had tried to change her mind. "Not now," he had said softly, holding her hand. "I'm not asking you to be a mom tomorrow. I just want to know we're dreaming in the same direction." But she had let go of his hand, and now here she was, babysitting triplets, getting bubble bath in her shoes, and wondering how the hell she got here. The next morning, she found Zara sitting alone in the living room, poking at a stuffed bunny like it had personally offended her. "Morning," Callie greeted, crouching down. "Everything okay?" Zara shrugged. "Lexi said you'd quit, like the others?" "Oh, did she now?" Callie raised an eyebrow. "And why would I quit?" "She says you don't like us," Zara answered honestly. "She says we're annoying." Callie blinked. "Well, that's a very honest review." Zara nodded solemnly. "She's not wrong." Callie let out a dry chuckle, then sighed. "Listen, I may not have liked kids before I met you, but that doesn't mean I don't care now." Zara looked up, eyes curious. "Really? Really?" Callie hesitated, then added, "Sometimes we don't know what we're capable of until we're tested." A small smile tugged at Zara's lips. "Like superheroes?" "Exactly." Later that day, during bath time, the triplets managed to get more soap on the walls than in their hair, and Sophie threw a sponge at Callie's face. "Bullseye!" she yelled triumphantly. "Okay, that's it. I'm switching careers," Callie muttered, dripping wet. But even as she wiped suds from her cheek, she couldn't ignore the warmth growing inside her, not from the bath water, but from the way Lexi giggled, or the way Zara pretended not to smile, or how Sophie said "thank you" under her breath when Callie dried her hair with the soft towel. It was subtle, but it was there. They were letting her in. That evening, she was folding tiny socks in the laundry room when Daniel walked in, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a polished architect and more like a tired dad. "I saw you earlier," he said, leaning on the doorway. Handling them like a pro. Callie gave a tired smile. "You mean dodging shampoo missiles?" "Thanks. I'll add that to my resume." Daniel laughed, then walked over to help her fold. "Seriously, though?" he said, voice softer now. "Thank you. It's been years since I've seen them laugh like that." Callie glanced at him. "They're tough, but they're good kids." He nodded. "They've been through more than they let on, losing their mom at one. I didn't know how to help them grieve. I just kept working. That must have been hard." He didn't answer right away. Then quietly he said, "I never thought I'd be doing this alone." Callie's heart twisted. She didn't know what to say, so instead she reached out and gently squeezed his hand. And in that quiet moment, under the hum of the laundry machine and the weight of 6 years unspoken, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just falling for the girls, she was falling for him again, too. Callie was just starting to feel like she had things under control, relatively speaking. The girls were still wild, but they now threw sponges at her with affection. Daniel wasn't just her boss anymore. He was slowly becoming a familiar presence again. There were evenings when they'd share quiet moments in the kitchen after the kids were asleep, cups of tea between them, like the years hadn't passed. But calm never lasts long in Callie's world, especially not when it comes wrapped in silk, high heels, and the kind of lipstick that doesn't smudge after 3 hours. Her name was Marissa Chen, and from the moment she stepped out of her sleek black car and into the foyer, Callie's instinct screamed, "Uh-oh." "Callie," Daniel had said that afternoon, walking into the kitchen, "I'd like you to meet someone." Callie turned around, holding a tray of freshly cut apples. "Someone?" The front door opened behind him, and in walked her. Tall, elegant, and effortlessly beautiful, Marissa had a glow that Callie hadn't seen since shampoo commercials in her 20s. She was carrying a pastry box and smiling like she'd just stepped out of a bridal catalog. "Hi," she said with a soft, breathy voice. "I'm Marissa." "Callie," she replied automatically, trying to keep the tray steady. "The nanny." Marissa's smile didn't waver. "Oh, lovely. You must be doing an amazing job. The girls haven't scared you off yet?" "Only mildly traumatized," Callie deadpanned, "but I'm building immunity." Daniel chuckled a little too fondly beside her. Callie pretended not to notice. At dinner, Marissa joined them, seating herself with natural grace, even pulling out homemade croissants from her box. The triplets stared at the pastries like they were made of gold. "These are from my cafe," Marissa said sweetly. "I own a little French bakery downtown." Of course she does, Callie thought. Of course she's a pastry chef with perfect hair and her own cafe. Zara took a bite and murmured, "This is really good." Sophie added, "Better than Yaya Callie's cookies." Callie blinked. "Et tu, Sophie?" Marissa smiled modestly. "Oh, I'm sure Callie makes wonderful cookies, too." "Not really," Lexi said with a grin. "She burns them." "Okay, wow," Callie laughed through gritted teeth. "Love this little roast session. Please go on." Daniel looked amused, but said nothing. Typical. Later that night, Callie found herself scrubbing dishes harder than necessary, while the girls huddled around Marissa in the living room, showing her their crayon drawings. From the way they were giggling, you'd think they had known her for years. Callie watched from the kitchen doorway. She wasn't used to this feeling. Jealousy wasn't her thing. She didn't like competing, especially not for a man she technically didn't have a claim on anymore. But there was something about the way Marissa blended in so seamlessly. It stung. She was graceful, polished, well-spoken, a grown-up. Callie felt like a circus clown with dish soap on her shirt. That night, as she folded laundry in the guest room, Lexi popped her head in. "Callie? Is Miss Marissa gonna be our new mommy?" Callie froze, a sock in each hand. "What makes you say that?" she asked carefully. "She's pretty," Lexi shrugged, and Daddy looked happy when she laughed. Callie smiled tightly. "Well, sweetheart, that's not really up to me." Lexi nodded, then added, "I still like you more, but I'm not supposed to say that." Callie's chest ached at the words. She ruffled Lexi's hair and kissed her forehead. "Your secret's safe with me." But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling. She was losing the only family she never thought she wanted. There was no official declaration, no sudden epiphany or grand moment of realization. But something had undeniably changed. Callie no longer felt like a guest in the house. She knew where the clean towels were kept without asking. She could tell the triplets apart, even from the back of their heads, even in mismatched pajamas and sleepy grumbles. She remembered which bedtime story belonged to whom, who liked their apple slices with cinnamon, and who absolutely did not. More importantly, they trusted her, and that trust didn't come with a ceremony. It came quietly, in the spaces between words, in the little shifts of routine and rhythm. It was in the way Lexi ran to her first after scraping her knee in the garden, in how Zara let her mend the frayed corner of her favorite blanket without a single protest. In how Sophie, once all eye rolls and exasperated sighs, now hovered in the kitchen asking, "Can I help stir?" And then, one night, after bubble baths and towel drying and a chorus of "just 5 more minutes," Callie tucked them in. The room was warm, filled with the scent of lavender shampoo and the soft hush of nighttime. Sophie looked up at her, eyes half-lidded with sleep. "You're like our mommy Nanny," she said, so casually it nearly knocked the air from Callie's lungs. Callie blinked. "What?" "You're not our mom," Lexi explained, yawning, "but you act like one." "And you're kind of funny," Zara mumbled from her pillow, hugging her blanket. Callie stood frozen at the foot of the bed, arms limp at her sides, heart twisting with a kind of ache she didn't know she could feel. A quiet, overwhelming love. They had no idea what they'd just done to her. The next morning, chaos arrived, disguised as pancakes. The girls insisted on helping with breakfast. Callie let them, perhaps against better judgment. They poured the milk, and the counter wore most of it, stirred the batter, half ended up on the ceiling fan, and argued over toppings, chocolate chips for everything, including scrambled eggs for reasons only kids understood. When Daniel walked into the kitchen, he paused in the doorway. Callie stood in the center of the chaos, apron on, flour in her hair, trying and failing to stop Sophie from pouring maple syrup into Lexi's juice while laughing so hard her eyes sparkled. He blinked. "Wow, is this safe?" Callie looked up, grinning. "Define safe?" He chuckled, stepping in to rescue the juice. For the first time in so long, the kitchen didn't feel sterile or silent. It felt like something it hadn't in years. A home. Later that afternoon, after the girls had raced outside to play, Daniel found Callie sitting cross-legged on a lounge chair on the veranda. A photo album lay open in her lap, its worn pages fluttering gently in the breeze. "They were so small," she said softly as he approached. Daniel sat beside her, his voice quiet. "Yeah, it feels like another lifetime." She turned a page carefully, fingertips lingering on a picture of 3 identical toddlers smudged with cake frosting. "You look happy here," she said. "I was," he admitted, "before everything changed." She looked at him then, really looked. "And now?" He didn't answer right away. The silence between them was thoughtful, not uncomfortable. "Now," he said finally, "I'm still figuring it out. But lately, I feel lighter, not so alone." He turned his gaze to her. "That's mostly because of you." The words caught Callie off guard. She opened her mouth to respond, but her heart beat too loudly, too wildly, and no sentence felt true enough. So instead, she said nothing. Sometimes silence was the most honest thing you could give someone. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the clouds drifting lazily above the garden. "You know," he murmured, "when we broke up, I thought I'd never meet someone who understood how much I wanted a family. Not just the idea of one, but the weight, the sacrifice, the joy." Callie's throat tightened. "But now here you are," he said. "And you're—" "Still not perfect," she interrupted with a half smile, voice gentle. "But you try," he said. "You really try. That means everything." Callie stared down at her hands, clenched in her lap. She had been holding her breath for too long. "I used to be afraid of kids," she whispered. "Afraid of what they'd see in me. Afraid I'd turn into someone I wasn't ready to be." He turned toward her, and now she lifted her eyes to meet his, and this time she didn't hide. "Now I'm afraid of losing them." The words hung between them, raw and quiet and real. Outside, laughter echoed from the backyard. A game of hide-and-seek was in full swing, full of squeals and shouts. But here, on the veranda, everything felt still. Daniel reached out, fingers brushing against hers. And this time, Callie didn't pull away. That night, the storm rolled in. Soft thunder murmured through the clouds. The triplets were asleep, their rooms dim and quiet, the hallways lit only by the glow of warm sconces. Callie stood by the window in the guest room, arms crossed, watching the rain streak across the glass. She didn't hear Daniel's footsteps until he was right beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just thinking too much." He didn't respond right away. Then softly, "I do that too." They stood in silence, the air between them charged with something unspoken. And when she turned to face him, his eyes already held hers, steady, unsure, open. She didn't mean to step closer. He didn't mean to reach for her face, but they did. The kiss was tentative at first, slow, searching. But when Callie didn't pull away, something in Daniel unraveled. The grief, the longing, the ache, they all poured into that moment. They ended up in her bed. There were no promises, no grand declarations, just two people, exhausted by loneliness, finding warmth in the only place it made sense. Later, when the room was quiet and their breathing had slowed, Daniel touched a strand of hair from her face and whispered, This felt right." Callie didn't speak. She only nodded, tears prickling at the corner of her eyes. Not from regret, but from how terrifying it was to want something this much. The next morning, as soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, the room still carried the quiet warmth of the night before. Callie woke up alone. Daniel had gotten up early. She didn't ask where he had gone, and he left no note behind. The entire day passed in silence. His gaze remained gentle, but there was something distant in his eyes, something she couldn't quite touch, as if he was searching for words, but none were light enough not to hurt. And then, 3 days later, the truth came. Daniel told her he had decided to propose to Marissa. Callie wasn't surprised. She had seen the signs, the hesitation in his voice, the faraway looks. "You're important," he said, his voice low like the wind before winter. "But Marissa, she feels like the safer choice, the one that makes sense on paper, not in my heart." Callie smiled faintly. No tears, no pleading. "I understand," she replied. And she truly did. She understood in the most painful way. When you love someone deeply, sometimes you let them go, not because you want to, but because you know they're not choosing to stay. That night, when the house fell silent, Callie sat in her room staring at the moonlight on the floorboards. Every part of her body felt heavy, numb, hollow. She had let herself believe in something again. She had let herself hope, and this was the price. She packed before sunrise, quietly. No fuss, no trace of heartbreak, except the letter she left on the dining table. Daniel, thank you for letting me be part of your world, even if just for a moment. Tell the girls I love them more than I ever thought I could love anyone. They didn't just change me, they saved me. I wish you happiness, with her, with everything. Callie. She paused before signing it, then added, you make a wonderful father. Never doubt that. The girls noticed by breakfast. Where's Yaya Callie? Sophie asked, peeking into the laundry room. She's not in the kitchen either, Zara added, and she didn't leave pancakes. Lexi burst into tears. Daniel rushed down from his study when he heard the cries. His heart dropped when he saw the envelope on the table, Callie's handwriting unmistakable. He opened it slowly and read every word like it was a goodbye carved in stone. He sat down, hard, the letter trembling in his hands. Is she coming back? Sophie asked quietly. Daniel looked at them, unable to speak. The tears came then, silent, uncontrollable. From Lexi, who hugged her bunny tighter. From Zara, who turned her face away. From Sophie, who tried to be strong but failed. She promised, Lexi whispered, her voice breaking. She said she wouldn't leave. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The ring sat untouched on the windowsill. He couldn't bring himself to call Marissa. Instead, he kept hearing Callie's laughter in his memory, the way she said the girls' names like they were her own, the way she looked at him when he wasn't watching. How had he not seen it? She hadn't just become their nanny, she had become their home. And now? She was gone. A week passed, then two. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, not peaceful, just empty. Daniel still woke up early, still packed the girls' lunch, still went to work. But everything felt mechanical, robotic, like he was playing house instead of living in one. The triplets were quieter too. Lexi didn't prank anyone. Sophie stopped drawing. Zara clung to her stuffed animals like they were lifelines. No one said her name out loud, but everything in the house screamed, Callie. News of Daniel's upcoming wedding to Marissa spread quickly. Everyone assumed it was the logical conclusion for a once-broken family. But only those inside knew the truth behind the strained smiles. Marissa wasn't heartless. She was perceptive enough to see the distance in Daniel's eyes whenever they spoke of the future, and sensitive enough to realize that the love he offered, though sincere, wasn't deep enough. One quiet evening, as they sat across from each other in the living room, Marissa exhaled softly. You still love Callie, don't you? Daniel didn't answer, and his silence was all the confirmation she needed. She gave a sad smile. I don't want to marry a man whose heart belongs to someone else. So it was Marissa who ended the engagement. No accusations, no bitterness. Just a quiet goodbye, at the right time, to the wrong person. Meanwhile, the triplets never gave up. Since Callie left, they talked about her every day, called her name in their sleep, and told stories about her to anyone who would listen. One day, Sophie, the most clever of the three, searched online. Missing nanny named Callie. No results. But when Lexi typed, Mommy Yaya who loves pancakes and cinnamon apples, something finally appeared. A blog. Callie's blog. In it, she wrote about the months she had lived with 3 little girls, the tiny stars of her life. She didn't name them, but the stories were unmistakable. Zara squealed, It's her, it's Mommy Yaya. They rushed to Daniel's room, holding out the tablet. Dad, we found Miss Callie. Daniel stared at the screen, heart racing uncontrollably. He had been waiting for this moment since the day she walked away. It didn't take long before Daniel drove the kids out to a quiet coastal town where Callie had been living, writing, healing, and preparing for a new chapter. When the door opened, Callie froze. Her breath hitched. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. Daniel, and 3 pairs of teary eyes that once called her Nanny, now running straight into her heart again. The girls rushed into her arms, clinging tightly as tears streamed down their cheeks. "Mommy, Yaya, where did you go?" "We missed you so much. Please don't leave us again." Callie broke down, pulling all 3 close, her shoulders shaking against Sophie's tiny frame. Daniel stood back, watching. When their eyes finally met, he said nothing, only looked at her with the eyes of a man who had lost everything and was ready to make it right. Callie placed a hand gently on her belly, where a new life had quietly begun to grow. Daniel's gaze followed. "Is that our baby?" She nodded, lips trembling. He stepped closer, carefully, and wrapped his arms around her from behind, arms that trembled with emotion but held steady with intention. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "I don't deserve you. But if you'll let me, I'll never walk away again. Not from you, not from our child, not from them." Callie didn't speak. She simply gripped his hand tighter, an unspoken promise. The girls wrapped their arms around both of them, forming a perfect circle of family. And in the golden light of the setting sun, they held one another close, reunited. Tears fell, not from sadness anymore, but from happiness, whole, and finally, home. That year, spring came early. The trees surrounding the Cruz estate bloomed in gentle shades of pink, and the sunlight lingered a little longer on the porch swing, where Callie used to sit alone, wondering if she truly belonged. She didn't have to wonder anymore. Since the reunion, everything moved slowly. Daniel didn't rush her. After all they had been through, he gave her time to believe, to breathe, to step into a new chapter without fear of old wounds. But the 3 little girls didn't wait. They called her Mommy as if there had never been distance. They wrote her letters, sent voice messages, drew pictures of the baby in her belly before Callie even had the courage to believe it herself. Sophie called the baby Little Bean. Zara was convinced it was a girl. Lexi insisted on naming it Waffle. Then, on a morning filled with sunlight and the sound of the girls giggling in the background, Daniel knelt before her again. "Not because it's time, not because we're supposed to, but because I can't imagine this life without you." Callie nodded through tears. This time, she wasn't afraid, because this time, she knew she had been chosen. Their wedding took place in the garden behind the villa. No grand celebration, no elaborate gown. Just a few close friends, some kind neighbors, and 3 serious little flower girls scattering petals along the stone path. Callie walked barefoot across the soft ground in a simple ivory silk dress. Daniel stood beneath a bougainvillea arch, holding a bouquet chosen by the girls, more colorful than tasteful, but strangely beautiful. "Are you sure?" he whispered as she came closer. She placed her hand over his, her gaze tender. "Never been more sure." When they kissed, the girls clapped so hard it startled the birds from the trees. And from that moment on, Callie truly became part of this home. Marriage didn't make life perfect. There were rushed mornings, chaotic evenings, piles of dirty dishes, crayons turning up in the strangest places. One day, Callie even found a rubber duck in the freezer. But this time, she wasn't just enduring it. She was living it. Swollen feet, relentless nausea, a body no longer her own. Yet Callie had never felt so right, so exactly where she belonged. Daniel was patient. The girls, overly enthusiastic. "Can the baby hear me yet?" Lexi asked, pressing her face to Callie's belly. "I think she likes it when I sing," Sophie said, even though her melody was unique. Zara began designing baby clothes using glitter pens and hot glue. One night, Callie sat beside Daniel on the porch swing. Inside, the gentle bickering of Sophie and Zara blended with Lexi's voice refusing to brush her teeth. Callie rested her head on his shoulder and sighed. "Do you really think we're ready for another one?" Daniel laughed. "Were we ever ready for the first 3? She smiled softly. "Fair point." They sat in silence for a while. Then Daniel turned to her, gently tucking her hair behind her ear. "I still can't believe I almost lost you." Callie looked at him, her eyes glowing like stars. "But you came back, for me." He shook his head slowly. "No, for us." The baby was born on a rainy morning at the end of May. A boy, Tiny. His cry echoed through the delivery room. The girls circled the crib, instantly competing to be the eldest in charge. Sophie began teaching him to read on day 2. Zara decorated the crib with hand-cut stars. Lexi burst into tears when he sneezed and scolded Daniel for scaring the baby. Callie lay on the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. Daniel sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly. In her arms was the tiny life, the final piece of a once-fractured family. She looked at them, the man who was once cold, the 3 little girls who once called her a nanny, and now all of them were hers. For the first time in her life, Callie no longer felt like she was running from anything. She had arrived, at the place where her heart could stay.